Good evening. I'm Dana Plunkett, Director of Counseling for Needham Public Schools. And joining me this evening from the department is Katrina Martin and Will Grannon. And also joining me this evening from the admissions side of things is Drew Carter, Director of Recruitment from the College of the Holy Cross, and Scarlett Bittner from UMass Amherst. So we're really excited to have this evening with you, our junior families. Pretty shortly, if not already, your students are beginning to look at their life after Needham High School. And we're really excited to begin working with them in earnest as to what they may look like for them each individually. We have a slide deck that our colleagues will go through this evening, and then we'll have some comments by the admissions reps who've joined us this evening, and then an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll try to address as many as possible by the end of this evening. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. We'll start off by simply talking about sort of our guiding philosophy in the counseling department of Needham High School. And really what we want our students to do as they think about what their experience will be after they graduate in a few short 18 months from now is to really look at what is the best match for them as they look at their post-secondary experience. And that this process is really about the match and not a prize to win. We in the counseling department really have what we feel is a very student-centered process where the journey is very individualized and driven by the student's unique goals and aspirations. So we really want students focusing on kind of what's on their wish list, what are the things that they want to do with their future, not what their peers or they've heard from other people. So again, it's a very student-centered process where our counselors work individually with each of your students to kind of find out what that path is. With endless opportunities as a post-secondary option, whether it's somewhere of the 4,000 colleges in the United States, colleges abroad, the military, working, gap year, we believe that there's a path for all of our students, and we really work individually to make sure that they find what makes the most sense for them. We also enjoy working collaboratively with you, the parents, in this process. So please feel free to reach out to your school counselor as you navigate this as well. Whether this is your first time, your second time, or multiple students, every student is different. Every student starts and ends this process in a different place. And again, our goal is to find the right match for their post-secondary experience by the end of their senior year. So with that said, I want to remind folks of who our school counselors are. This is a really dedicated group of individuals, many of whom have had years and years of experience in supporting students through the post-secondary process, and will continue to do so with your juniors. Pretty shortly, if not already, we'll be starting with your juniors in giving them a brief overview, similar content to what we're going over tonight, and then we'll start working individually with them. I can say, having worked with this department for over 13 years, you couldn't be in better hands in terms of individualizing this process and supporting every student through making their post-secondary decisions. So with that said, I'm going to start by turning it over to Katrina Martin, who's going to continue with some overall information on this post-secondary process, and then we'll hear from our admissions reps shortly. Katrina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dana. Good evening, everyone. My name is Katrina, one of the school counselors. I am going to be sharing a general overview of what your 11th graders and 11th grade families can be expecting over the next year and a half or so. We've broken things down into 3 phases. Phase 1 is junior year. Phase 2 is this upcoming summer before senior year, and phase 3 is senior year. So we'll talk in more detail about what each of those timelines look like. And I do want to preface the conversation by recognizing that not all of our students are necessarily targeting 4-year college, either at all or right away. And we'd like you to know that as school counselors, we're prepared and excited to support students who have maybe an alternative plan, whether that's gap year, going into the workforce, military, et cetera, et cetera. Tonight, we're really focused on the college application process because there are so many different aspects of it that we want our students and families to be aware of. But please know that, as Dana mentioned, much of our work with students is individualized. And if your student is not sure if this is the path for them, we are more than happy to support them through that and walk through the steps with them. So, phase one, here we are, junior year. In the fall, school counselors visited 11th grade wellness classes to reintroduce SCORE, which we actually introduced for the first time last year in 10th grade to do some career exploration exercises with our students. We've brought this back for our students and shown them how it can be used for college exploration. We also discussed standardized testing this fall. Many 11th graders took the PSAT for the first time or perhaps the second time, which was an excellent opportunity to practice for the SAT. So this year, 11th grade, we are encouraging students to continue using online research tools like SCORE and Big Future to be exploring different college options. As Dana mentioned, there's thousands of colleges in the US alone, and it's not a simple task to narrow excuse me, to narrow down that list and determine what's going to be the best fit for each individual. Some great ways to begin narrowing down that list is online research, campus visits, tours, and information sessions. Uh, it should be noted that campus tours and information sessions can happen in person, ideally, and also virtually. Many colleges offer virtual tours and information sessions for students who may or may not be able to travel to visit their campus. During COVID, we saw just about every college become fully available virtually for prospective students, and many of those resources continue to be available. So we encourage our 11th grade students and families to take advantage of those resources because we know it's expensive and challenging to find the time to visit colleges all across the country. College fairs are another fabulous resource and a great way for students to stay local while also learning about many colleges at once. So, college fairs are a great way to connect with admissions representatives in person, ask questions, introduce the students to admissions reps, and also demonstrate interest. We'll be sharing more opportunities for college fairs this spring and next fall, so you can look out for that. And finally, our last bullet point here for junior year, students will actually begin building their application in a couple of different ways. The first is possibly preparing for standardized tests like the SAT and the ACT, while also understanding test optional policies. There are many colleges out there that are considered test optional, which means that they do not require the SAT or the ACT in order for a student to be considered. Our admissions representatives are going to be touching on standardized testing a little later in the evening, so we'll cover that in greater detail. Teacher letters of recommendation. We are going to ask all of our 11th grade students to ask at least one, if not two, letters of recommendation from their junior year teachers beginning this March. So ideally, all 11th grade students will have at least one teacher, junior year teacher, to agree to write them a letter of recommendation before they head into this summer. Many students will consider asking for a second teacher recommender. That could be a junior year teacher, or it could be a different teacher that they have a strong relationship with. We don't encourage students to ask for more than two teacher letters of recommendation because many colleges aren't interested in reading more than two letters. Some colleges will only read one, but it's not a bad idea to have a second letter of recommendation lined up in case students happen to have a college that's looking for two. We'll also ask 11th graders and their families or caregivers, guardians, to complete, it's okay, to complete an online questionnaire and a parent guardian brag sheet. This helps to inform your school counselor, who will also be writing a letter of recommendation on every 11th grade student's behalf. We take great pride in writing strong and rich letters on behalf of our students, and in order to do that, we really value your student and parent guardian input to remind us of all of the meaningful activities and experiences that you've had over the years. That will be distributed and available to you via SCORE. And lastly, the personal essay, or also, AKA the college essay. Most, if not all, 11th grade students will have an opportunity to actually write a personal essay in their English class this year. Some English classes even do the assignment twice. We encourage 11th graders to take this assignment seriously because it's a fabulous opportunity to get some feedback on a personal essay from an English teacher. So I've already highlighted a long list of tasks that 11th graders are going to be tackling this spring. And the good news is students are not expected to go this alone. So the individual school counselor meetings, I'll speak for myself and on behalf of my colleagues. This is the part of our job that we love the most, is meeting with students one-on-one, and perhaps in small groups too this spring, to understand what students' goals are and to come up with a really strategic plan about how to reach those goals. We'll be working with students, as I mentioned, possibly in small groups and definitely individually this spring and next fall, to plan not only their courses for next year, but of course their college applications. So notably, the course selection process will be beginning in the next month or so. Teachers will not only make recommendations for students for their levels for next year, but rising seniors will also have the opportunity to make some choices that they haven't been able to make in years past. Seniors have fewer requirements of them and more flexibility to take electives and courses in their area of interest. So we encourage rising seniors or current 11th graders to think long and hard about the many elective options that are available to them and to select courses that are appropriately challenging and interesting and relevant to their possible future interests. So, student is interested or they think they might be interested in studying business. We have a number of courses that are relevant that will give them the exposure to that content that they'll likely see at the college level, for example. So, we'll work with students through that process and encourage them to be thoughtful about their choices. Next, we will review and discuss students developing college lists and stay organized, help them to stay organized in SCORE. While we as school counselors don't necessarily develop lists of colleges on behalf of the student, we're more than happy to offer feedback and to make suggestions based on our experiences. We'll work with students individually on testing strategies. As I mentioned, some students may find that as they're building their list of colleges, they're not required to actually submit SAT or ACT scores. It's our philosophy to encourage students to try the SAT or the ACT, even if they're not the most confident test takers, with the understanding that if their scores are not as strong as they hoped, they can simply choose to not send the scores to their list of colleges. Sometimes students surprise themselves, and if a college does pop up on their list that requires the scores, we'd rather have them have the score in their back pocket available rather than scrambling next fall to take a last minute test. I just talked about letters of recommendation. We'll work with students and ask our students this spring who they plan to ask and talk about strategy. Some colleges are really specific in what they're looking for. They might want a humanities teacher, so English and history, and a math or science teacher. Some colleges may only want one letter, and students often have questions about which teacher they should ask to be strategic, so we can help students with that. And lastly, we will certainly talk with students about any sort of specialized plans they have, whether that's athletic recruitment, auditioning for certain art programs, submitting portfolios. I mentioned gap year and military enlistment. We're here to support students in whatever their individual path is, and we're prepared to help them plan for the next steps. Phase two is this upcoming summer. We know that students are busy with summer jobs and camps, perhaps family travel, and we encourage them to take full advantage of that and enjoy their summertime. And this is an important summer. And if students do have the time on a rainy day, we highly encourage that they're thinking about this next, phase three, I guess you could say, or they're thinking about what their next steps are. So this is a really great time to be refining their list, continue to visit campuses, access online and virtual tools, narrow down their list. and also work on essays. Some students have heard about supplemental essays. Many colleges are asking college-specific questions in addition to that personal statement we talked about. Summertime is a great time to be working on this because students aren't also dealing with the competing demands of their courses for the most part. We have seen an increasing number of students who are beginning to work on their Common Application. The Common App, many of you have heard of it already, but just in case, it is one common place where students can apply to many colleges rather than filling out, dozens or, not dozens, but hopefully a few applications. They can fill out one application and submit that to most colleges. We're seeing a number of students who are working on their Common Application over the summer to reduce stress in the fall and to generally feel more prepared. I do want to mention that we as school counselors are not expecting that students have completed their college application process by the time they're returning to school in the fall. That is not the expectation. However, it is encouraged to at least be thinking about it and to be narrowing down their list so they come into the fall feeling at least somewhat confident in what their next steps are. The last thing I'll mention from this slide is one important date that you should know. The Common App is still available to this year's seniors through August 1st. So that means current 11th grade students are not able to submit their applications until August 1st at the absolute earliest. This is important to note because if students are accessing the Common App to work on those essays that we mentioned, any work that's submitted or essays that are drafted in the Common App may not be there after August 1st. So we'll talk with students about this, but we want students to remain organized, but to not be planning to submit their applications over the summer because most of the time that isn't possible. Phase 3, senior year. So in September, we, the school counselors, will host a similar evening event, a webinar for seniors and for families to share more nitty-gritty details about what you can expect about the senior fall application experience, senior year application experience, I should say. A few notable deadlines that you can be aware of now. The early action and early decision application deadlines are typically at the earliest October 15th, but typically November 1st. January 1st, January 15th, February 1st, and so on and so forth are typically what's called the regular decision application deadlines. We have noticed over the years that the vast majority of our students are targeting early action deadlines, so typically November 1st. But if we're working with a student who knows that they've got a busy summer up ahead and a busy fall, maybe with sports or theater or activities or a job, it's perfectly fine to target January 1st or the regular decision deadline dates. There's no penalty for waiting for the regular decision dates. So we want you to be aware of that. So while it is sort of the norm at Needham High School to be submitting applications for early action or early decision, the regular decision deadline is perfectly acceptable, and we'll work with students to not rush through their applications to submit for the early deadlines. Fall and winter of senior year, families will receive information from us about financial aid applications. We are actually going to be hosting a financial aid informational night, partnering with Bentley University this March. I believe we have more information about that later in the evening. But fall and winter of senior year is when students and families will actually be submitting financial aid applications, including the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and possibly the CSS profile, which is required by some colleges. More information to come about those. Winter and spring of senior year is when students will largely be receiving their admissions decisions and evaluating their outcomes. And finally, May 1st of senior year is the deadline for most colleges for students to actually enroll in their college and put down a deposit. So by May 1st, the vast majority of our students have made their decision on where they're going and have submitted a deposit to save their spot. Okay. So I want to highlight 3 online resources that we'll be encouraging students to use, and we highly encourage families to look through as well. I mentioned SCORE. All 11th grade parents and guardians should have received an invitation to join SCORE earlier today. If you didn't receive something in your email, please don't hesitate to reach out to your student school counselor so that we can invite you to join SCORE and you can check out what it's all about. SCORE is our main tool for research, exploration, list building, organization, and it's a way that we communicate with students in addition to email about this whole application process. I also mentioned that SCORE has some career exploration opportunities. Students had the opportunity to actually go through this activity last fall, but it remains available if they want to redo it or go back and review their results. Big Future, owned by the College Board, is another fabulous website. Not only do they have college exploration resources and opportunities, they also have information about scholarships and financial aid and also other career information. And lastly, our website. So, our school's counseling website, we've worked really hard over the last few years to improve it and provide updated information and actually really similar information that we're sharing tonight in greater detail. So, we highly encourage you to look through that and take advantage of the information and the resources that are available there. And now we'll turn it over to our admissions representatives who are joining us this evening. They're going to share some information from their perspective about what juniors and junior families should be thinking about in the months ahead and how they can prepare for the college application process from their side. So from the College of the Holy Cross, we have Drew Carter, and from University of Massachusetts Amherst, we've got Scarlett Bittner. Thank you for being here.
Scarlett, do you want to go first? Do you want to
Yeah,
jump in?
absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Scarlett Bittner. I'm an assistant director of admissions at UMass Amherst. I've been working there for close to 10 years now. I am also a proud alum. I studied theater education and psychology. So if any parents out there were wondering what one can do with a theater degree, this is it. UMass Amherst is the public four-year state university. We are the flagship of the UMass system. We're, I would say, a mid-sized large university. So we've got 23,000 undergraduate students on our campus. A lot of the big state schools tend to have quite a few more than that, closer to the 40 and 50,000 student mark. So the bigger side of medium. We have about 100 different majors, 60 different minors, 400 different student clubs and organizations. Of course, our biggest fun fact is we've been ranked #1 dining in the country for 9 years in a row now. We are very proud of that fact. If you haven't taken a tour of UMass yet, you'll hear about it approximately 7 million times while on tour. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight and hopefully give some clarity into the coming months.
Thanks, Scarlett. Drew?
Hi, friends. I'm Drew Carter. I'm fortunate enough to work at Holy Cross. Holy Cross is a small school located in Worcester, Massachusetts. We have a lot of things in common with a lot of small schools, both here in the Northeast and actually across the country. At 3,000, to use Scarlett's example here, that puts us on the bigger end of small. A lot of the small schools here in New England are closer to 2,000, but I'm going to tell you, as someone who spent plenty of time on both those size campuses, there's really no difference. We tend to attract students who are looking to live on campus as part of a community for all 4 years. So we're a school that offers housing for students for all 4 years. And students tend to have a clearer idea once they've visited schools about whether they picture themselves living a kind of a pedestrian experience in college, walking to the dorm and to class and to the gym and everywhere, or whether they picture perhaps maybe a more hybrid approach where they have that for a year or two and then live maybe a little bit more of a removed or perhaps even cosmopolitan lifestyle in college. So that tends to be the bigger, more university, big city approach. Again, best way to get a sense of that is to put your boots on the ground. We're also completely undergraduate, so there's no graduate courses or graduate students or graduate options on our campus. And I think, the students at Holy Cross and schools like us tend to like that idea that everything they see, they know is for them. And the opportunities available for students like that tends to speak to the students who end up enrolling at Holy Cross. We're also a Jesuit school and a Division I school, and located in the great city of Worcester. There's a few things there that really attract. The last thing I'll say is our classes tend to be between 15 and 20 students. As I said to a group of students yesterday that I was speaking to last night, I said, the good news is the professors know your name. The bad news is professors know your name. And there's what comes with that is right, like personalized attention, but also daily accountability. And for some students, that's exactly what they're looking for in college. And for other students, that's completely not what they're looking for in college. And they want a little bit more anonymity in the classroom. And the good news is, as you already heard, we're close to 4,000 colleges here, colleges and universities in the US. So there's lots of great variety and lots of great options. So that's just a little bit about Holy Cross, and more so, I think, on the bigger extent, schools like Holy Cross. And I'll sort of finish with one tip that relates a little bit to what you've heard from a few folks already tonight, and that is about the importance of, if possible, of visiting campuses. But I also want to de-escalate it a little bit. I think sometimes we think of a visit to a college campus as being so important and so precious that we have to decide exactly where we're going to apply before we even go. Can we just get rid of that idea from the start? Let's de-escalate visits to college campuses. Sometimes it involves like a visit to UMass out in Amherst and a campus tour, and engaging with tour guides. That's great. We need jobs in the admissions world, so continue to engage with our offices. But you know what? Sometimes you're just on the way home from grandma's house and there's a sign on the highway that says this college, this exit, and you get off and you like drive around for 10 minutes. That matters and that's meaningful because, especially early in the timeline, what's important for 11th graders is to start to build a sense of perspective, to start to build their own vocabulary around college, so that then they can eventually be in a better position to identify preferences when it comes to where they might spend their 4 years. So let's de-escalate those visits, especially early in the timeline. Let's try to get as many of those like low stakes visits, low stakes flybys, and maybe even walk arounds, 10 and 15 minutes. That's meaningful, that matters. And the more of those you do, the more confidence we can build around visiting campuses. So excited to be here tonight, and look forward to any questions that might come up.
If I can just pop off what Drew said for one quick second. I absolutely love that last little nugget. We are so fortunate in this area around Needham to have so many amazing colleges and universities, and they really represent the full range of larger public schools, small liberal arts schools, schools in the city, schools that have like specializations, whether that be arts or like Wellesley, the women's only college. Like there's so many opportunities for you to pop in, take a 5-10 minute stroll, see what you think. And you might realize after 2 visits to campuses in the city that that's not a good fit for you. And then you automatically know, as you start delving deeper into your list, that you don't want to go to any school that's kind of like that. You want trees around you and things like that. So
Great. Thank you both for that introduction. One, I want to encourage our students and families to use the Q&A feature to put in your questions. We have a couple more slides before we get into the official Q&A to keep Drew and Scarlett chatting a bit more, but we really want to hear your questions. And they're starting to come in, but we only have a few, and I think we'd rather answer your questions than my questions for Drew and Scarlett. So thank you. Keep them coming, but use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature. We'd like to, in this slide, Scarlett and Drew, we just, as students are kind of beginning this process, as you both mentioned, and exploring and kind of checking things out, part of we hear is about the fit. One, how does the student define the right fit for them and the families, as well as like on the college end. How do you see fit when you're talking to students about when they're exploring your schools or the process in general? I don't know, Drew, do you want to jump in and just kind of talk about how you review things and how you see that factor in for Holy Cross?
Yeah, I'll gosh, there's a very few basic things I can mention, but I'm gonna frankly be controversial and I'm gonna reject the idea of fit a little bit. Um, there's a few sort of basics like you as I already said, if you didn't want to be in a small classroom and you didn't want to be called upon by the professor, boy, you wouldn't fit in at Holy Cross or a school like ours. Um, you wanted to drive everywhere, or you wanted to only walk on a flat campus, boy, you wouldn't fit in at Holy Cross at all. That would be a little bit challenging. Um, but I think, especially early in the timeline, we often try to force our 11th graders into sort of binary options. Do you want to be at a big school or a small school? And do you want to X or Y? And sometimes the answer is I would be open to being at a big school or a small school. For some students, the answer might be both. And in the admissions world, we're looking for great students who can compete in our classroom and can find success. But there's so many ways in which that's defined. That gosh, it's not, if it were as easy as a GPA and a test score and plotting you on a chart, like, gosh, score still might even do. Um, gosh, our job would be boring and it probably wouldn't even exist anymore. There would be computers doing it. So, um, I, I like the idea of sort of like identifying preferences in a hierarchy and identifying a vocabulary with that. That's true for the students and also true for the admissions world. Um, the last thing I'll say is I think the the more you engage, as a student visiting campuses, and also like the more you sort of engage in the admissions process, the easier it is for you and for schools to find out about what that fit might be. So those visits to campuses, those visits and conversations with your school counselor, and even from people like Scarlett and I from time to time. Those sort of experiences, I think, will move you closer to identifying what's a right fit for you, and also will probably help the colleges figure out if you're a right fit for them.
Yeah, and I very much agree with what Drew said, and I'll add to that too. If finding a good fit for you is also going to kind of come down to the academics you want to pursue. You might know going into this summer exactly what you want to study, and that's awesome. If you change your mind 2 years down the road, are the schools you're looking at, do they have other options for you to go to, or would you have to transfer schools? This happened to me. But also, if you don't know what you want to do, are there schools that are kind of geared a little bit more towards the fields you might be interested in? Are you more interested in a school that just has a million different options that you can kind of play around with? And some of those might end up kind of being the best fit for you as a school where you can explore a lot of different options, either academically or socially. One of the big changes of college, I think, is that students are only in class usually for a couple of hours a day in comparison to high school. And so there's a lot more time for things like extracurriculars. And so finding a campus that has activities you're either currently involved in that you'd like to stay involved in, or things that sound really fun and exciting that you've never gotten the chance to do. Those can all be good indicators of if you'll be able to kind of find your community and make that school a good fit for you.
Great. Thank you both. We don't really have to jump into this slide that could become that we're getting testing questions from the families anyways, but we can leave this up here so people can see it and chat about it as we go. But I see the questions coming in, so I wanted to kind of jump on that. One question was, on the idea of kind of the exploration when students are visiting your campuses or visiting campus in general, there's, the tour, there's the information session. Are there other opportunities to get to know the school better, like more specifically, like speaking to a professor or a student or major specific experiences that you have or would encourage students? So when they're how did how can they make even more out of their visit if they're wanting more? Drew, do you want to start? Oh, Scarlett, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I think something that is very common in a UMass student is they all love to chat. So most high schoolers, when they're going and visiting campus, they will stop a student on a path to the library or wherever and just ask, hey, what do you think about this school? Those kinds of things. Most of our academic departments do also offer student-led tours from students that are in those programs. So if you are interested in something specific like business or engineering, you can take a tour of those facilities with a current student. Same thing with things like the Honors College. We also have a lot of different virtual events that happen if you can't make it out to campus. And one of those is called the UREP UMass Real Talks. And so those are student only panels. So without the presence of like myself or another staff member, it's just current students. And it's kind of student to student asking questions and getting more candid answers about whether the school might be a good fit for them.
Yeah, and I was just telling a group of students yesterday about open house events. And open house, most colleges will do a few open house events a year, and they tend to be larger admissions events where you might be able to engage certainly with a campus tour, but also have a chance to chat with professors or deans from certain areas. Worth knowing that those are totally fake events. That's not what a normal day on that college campus is like. But it is an opportunity to talk to folks other than folks like Scarlett and I. It's the folks that sort of like leapfrog past us and talk to people really on those campuses. I'll give one other tip about visiting campuses is I always tell folks, go to where food is served to the college students. I visit colleges all the time when I'm out for work, and I always go to the student center. I find that coffee shop, I get a scone, and I'm going to tell you in 10 minutes, you can figure out what the culture is like at that college. You see how the normal kids dress, not just the tour guides. You see signups for student clubs and activities. You see the ski club, like where they're going next weekend. You see the dance-a-thon like sign up. You see kids talking to each other, and you see copies of the student newspaper, which you want to see what kids are really talking about at that school, grab the student newspaper.
Great. Thank you. An early question, we talked about our teacher rec process, like starting to think about who might be, good people to ask for the students as they're considering their teachers and experiences. From your side, what makes a good teacher rec? Like, what are you looking for in the teacher rec? Is it the place where the kid got the perfect A and everything was great? Or is there you want to hear a story? What makes a good teacher rec on your end? And is there potential like teacher rec where it's been too long ago, as your eighth grade teacher or your seventh grade teacher or something like that. So what makes a good teacher rec for you guys? Drew, do you want to start?
What really matters most in the teacher recommendation is how well that teacher knows the student and then what they would say about that student. We're not really going to spend the time to look at what grade was earned. We're not going to really care where that teacher went to college necessarily, or what that teacher's resume looks like. It's how well they know the student and then what they would say about the student. I would, especially for required recommendations, I would try to focus on the high school years, if possible, maybe even from later high school years. This could be a great conversation to have with your school counselor too. If you're thinking about asking X and Y teachers for recommendation, if they would agree with those asks, but certainly who knows you best and what they would say about you, and then hopefully from those high school years, perhaps even from later high school years.
Yeah, for us, I agree with like the content. If you didn't do super great in a class, but you had a really good connection with the teacher and they watched you come in for extra help every single morning for the entire year, and they can talk about your resilience in that course, that could be just as strong of a recommendation letter as a class where you got the A plus, but you didn't connect with the teacher as much. Actually, probably even more so. You are all very, very lucky to be at Needham High School. Your counselor recommendations are absolutely incredible. And for UMass Amherst, we only require one academic-based letter of recommendation. So your counselor recommendation will take care of that. So for us, it's more about who else can speak to who you are inside or outside of the school classroom. While I would say probably steer away from, a middle school teacher on the whole, if your middle school teacher has now also been your theater director for 8 shows over the past 4 years, and they've watched you grow over like a decade, that is a really good person to write that recommendation letter for you. Or like if you are involved with a youth group and you've known someone in there since you were in the 5th grade and that they have seen that trajectory, that's a great person to ask to write a recommendation letter. We're happy to have recs from outside of academic sources.
Great. Appreciate that. And we will work with the students and families on this process and have discussions about, think about who might be a good recommendation, both teacher-wise and any additional ones that might be considered. And there was a question, teachers do often ask students to fill out a little reflection of their course experience. Sometimes the teachers need reminders of some of those amazing assignments you did in the first semester, so they may be asking that. And as school counselors, as Katrina had shared, we do ask a self-reflection be done for us, and it becomes a discussion piece as we think about how best to support the students through our letter of recommendation. So that's just another note on that. The question, there's a question about just grade point average and how the number kind of does or doesn't factor into this process for you. I know there's some very specific requirements for UMass and other public schools in Massachusetts, but not always. So I'm just curious, and the question was, the number, the GPA, how does that factor into the admissions process for you? Do you want to start, Scarlett, with that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a bit of a long explanation. So for UMass Amherst, we recalculate GPAs. So we look at the student's transcript. We take every core class they took for all 3 or 4 years, whatever we have when they've applied, as well as one elective each year. We give extra weighting for honors for you all, accelerated as well. We count as honors, AP, dual enrollment, all of those things. And GPA is definitely, and like grades overall are definitely a part of the process. We want to make sure students are going to do well when they come to campus and not kind of be out of their depth. That being said, it is not the end all be all. We do review holistically. So we do look at, if they had a big grade drop sophomore year, is there a logical explanation behind this? Or were they just like scrolling on their phone too much and didn't do any of their homework? Those kinds of things we can take into account. And that being said, because we are a state school, we do have to go by the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education standards, which means that students need at least a 3.0 GPA to be admissible. If they're not submitting test scores, if they're choosing to submit test scores, it's above a 2.0 GPA. So there are some parameters in there. I will say though, we are very lucky to live in Massachusetts, where higher education is such a heavily supported thing. A lot of students will take advantage of the mass transfer programs through community colleges to kind of bring up that grade point average from high school if it is too low for us to start off with. As long as you're maintaining a certain GPA at one of the community colleges in Massachusetts, you get guaranteed entry into any of the state schools you would like for almost all of the programs. And there's a huge transfer community on our campus as well. I was a transfer to UMass myself. So it's a very popular pathway for students if you're not meeting those initial Massachusetts Board of Higher Education standards. And I will say too, that those benchmarks are for us. Some of the other Massachusetts state schools have some more flexibility and different entry programs for students with lower GPAs as well.
Right. Drew, any comment on the GPA?
The only thing I'll add is maybe a little context about holistic admissions, and really to say two quick things. Number one, um, holistic admissions does not mean that everything counts the same. It means everything's under consideration. At many, if not most schools, the academic profile of the student is the largest driver of the conversation around the decision. An academic profile really is like, the grades and the courses and testing if it's available. Everything else will be under consideration. That's the holistic part, but that doesn't mean everything counts the same. The last thing I'll say about holistic admission is if you have the opportunity to travel, to go on campus tours and attend information sessions, I hope that you will play my ice cream game, which is if you hear the word holistic review said during a college information session, you have to get ice cream that day. And trust me when I say if you play my game, you will end up eating lots of ice cream.
Thank you, Drew. Appreciate it. A great question about just the essay. Like, what was the essay? What was the best essay, or the topic of the best essay, or one of a great essay that stands out to you? I guess, and why did you like it? The personal essay. Drew, do you have any highlight personal essays that you'd want to reference?
So I have, for over 20 years, I've kept a spreadsheet listing the my favorite essays that I read every year. And I keep in one column the student's name so that I could perhaps look up the essay. In the second column, I keep their high school because that sometimes helps spark a memory. And then the third column, I write the subject matter. I've got over 20 tabs on this spreadsheet. And it's not interesting to look through the name column. It's not interesting to look through the high school column, but it is very interesting to look through the topic column, which I have. And I can tell you that about well, let me put it this way. There are some topics on there that I think most people would expect, right? Surviving genocide, beating cancer, my parents' divorce, some really massive, and those make up about 3 to 4% of the best essays I've read over a couple decades. What it means is that about over 90% of my favorite essays are about, little small topics that most people would never think is going to create the great essay, right? The truth is that there's no connection between the topic of the essay and the quality of the essay, right? We read great essays about grandmas every year, and we read terrible essays about grandmas every year. It's not grandma's fault, okay? What's important is how the student feels about writing about that topic. The best essay for the student to write is on the topic that they want to write about. And I think often students write on topics that they think they're supposed to write about, or they think we want them to write about, when the truth is we really want to read the essay on the topic that you want to write about.
Yeah, I think the essays that stick with me the most are the ones where students use something that's important to them in their life to kind of reveal other parts of their personalities. There's one from a couple of years ago that I think about all of the time. The student used her different playlist titles to kind of break down when she listens to them and what they've taught her, and like what memories they bring up and how that playlist will serve her in college, and like what situation she will use it in college. So I really love that. I read one last year, I think, where the first line was, "This was written by ChatGPT." The second line was, "Just kidding, I'm not crazy." And then went into like using like sort of like, what do they call it? Like the acronistic poem or whatever, acrostic poem, to be like, C stands for, and then talking about something that I was like, what a hook. So I like ones where I can really see personality come through and a sense of humor. It's really the biggest platform students get to showcase their personalities, and it's really nice to see students speaking like themselves, I think, for me.
Thank you both. And once again, families and students, in your English classes this year, there's a lot of analytical writing, but there is a personal essay assignment. So really, you can have good conversations with, even though it is an assignment, it's really an exercise to get you kind of practicing writing the personal essay. So, and to get feedback from your teacher and to just really just try out some topics and be thinking about it. And doesn't mean it has to be your essay that you're using for college admissions down the road, but kind of the practice of writing a personal essay is important because often it's not the first topic or the first draft that ends up being what is submitted at the end. So going through the exercise in English class we feel is helpful. Um, uh, Scarlett and Drew, there's a question about just from the parents, like I think it's from a parent, but what should parents avoid doing in the process, or avoid doing with it says, through the admissions office, but anything parents should avoid, both either through you or just in the process in general?
Yeah, I think it's definitely hard because you want to help and you want to support and you want to be the one to kind of reach out and get the ball rolling and all of that, especially for students who are maybe dragging their feet a little bit. But it is really important to kind of let it be as student-led as it can be and listen to their opinions and all of that. I think it is really important to have things like financial conversations earlier on in the game as we're getting into next fall. Just kind of like set some realistic expectations about what you can and cannot do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with parents reaching out occasionally to like admissions folks like myself or Drew to ask questions, but the more of that can come from your students, the better, because it's going to set up good habits. Once a student is enrolled at a university, we can no longer communicate with parents or guardians about anything that has to deal with that student. We have to communicate with the student directly. So getting in that practice is going to be a good habit to start building over the rest of this year and throughout senior year. Obviously, there might be some things where if you need to call and ask a question and our office hours are 10 to 4 and your student is in school and activities at that time, obviously you can take on that for them. But if you're going to be the one to send an email because your student can't, copy them. Let us reply all so that way we can keep the student involved in those conversations as well.
Of all that.
Oh,
Yeah, that's I'll add one very, very specific thing. We worry about the stress and anxiety that's associated around the college search and application process. We in the admissions world do, school counselors do, and I know that parents do as well. And then when parents are have the opportunity to be around their children's friends, often the first questions they say are, where are you applying? What are you studying? Where are you going to apply early? And gosh, the applying to college is a very, very public judgment process for teenagers. And I don't like the moment in the morning when I walk down the stairs and my wife looks at what I'm wearing and I can see her already getting ready to give me feedback, and I'm married to her and she's bound to me for life. I don't like that judgment. Now imagine being a teenager and knowing that you've got to put yourself out there to colleges and the community can be a part of witnessing how you're judged. So what I'd say is like, let's just stop asking our children's friends where they're applying. Let's ask them, let's talk to them about what they're excited about for college, what they're nervous about for college, and maybe what their reactions were to certain visits. But let's leave the making of the lists out of our conversations with not with our children, but with their friends.
And by the same token, if your student is kind of stressed about that same thing with others, become comfortable setting those boundaries with folks outside of your nuclear family. If they don't want to talk about where they're applying and where they've heard back from until they know where they're going to college, if you need to be the one to step up and be like, we're not going to talk about that right now, but they're interested in studying XYZ, then kind of you can take that upon yourself to help your student feel comfortable and not as overwhelmed and judged by friends and family and all of that.
I'll also add that, the high school counselors really also encourage families to set some parameters within the family as well. That maybe there's a set day of the week that there's a conversation about how things are going with the post-secondary process. And then the rest of the week, it's off the table unless the student brings it up. Because also within the family, you want a sense of preservation of your family time, whether it's with regards to this process. So it's important as a family unit to sort of set some guardrails around it, so it doesn't become the all-consuming conversation at every moment, dinner table or in the car or on the way to school or on the way to practice. That you also have some guardrails so that your family isn't just existing around this process. So we encourage students and families to set some parameters for themselves as well.
Thank you, all three of you. Appreciate it. We have this testing slide up, but maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because there have been some questions, because our students are engaging, they're planning, some have already taken SATs or ACTs. And just from your ends, how does testing play a role in the process? What plan do you guys have in place for next year? And just like, how do you incorporate testing if students submit it, if you are test optional? Scarlett, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are test optional at UMass Amherst. So that means if there is nothing submitted, we consider the GPA a little more heavily in terms of the academic profile. If a student does choose to submit standardized test scores, whether that be SAT or ACT, either is fine. Then we will use them as a part of that review process on the academic side of things. My general advice for us is, because since we've gone test optional, our scores have absolutely skyrocketed. So they're not necessarily a good indicator for whether or not an individual should actually submit test scores and whether they would be helpful. My general advice is, if a student takes a standardized test and they're proud of that score and they feel like it's a good reflection of what they can do academically, go ahead and send it in. We have been test optional since the pandemic. We have no intentions of changing that anytime soon. So everyone is safe for next year. If you're on the fence at all about test scores, absolutely feel free to reach out to us or your counselors and kind of talk about the more minutia of it all. We've also seen, for us specifically, since going test optional, that the amount of students submitting them has really drastically decreased. So only about 20% of students have been submitting test scores these days, even less in some of our competitive majors. So it is very much up to you whether or not you want to submit them. We will not assume you did poorly on them if you don't submit them. If they're not there, we don't have anything to look at, we're going to move along.
I'm sure that many of you read any of those articles that came out recently about those few schools that went back to requiring standardized testing. I'm just wondering if anybody read that article about the thousands of schools that are staying test optional. I bet you didn't, because no one's writing that article. They're just writing the one about the 3 or 4 schools that have gone back testing. The truth is, I think the estimate now is still over 90% of colleges and universities in the US are test optional, in spite of those thousands of articles about the very few schools who have gone back to requiring. We're test optional here at Holy Cross. Echo everything that Scarlett said. And yeah, and if you're really stuck, like, just have a quick conversation with your school counselor, right? They know your overall academic profile. They know the list of schools you're applying to, and understand that you may submit to some schools on your list, but not submit to other schools on your list. And understanding what those schools' policies might be is hard. So definitely check in with your school counselor.
Great. And there were some other, like, more minutia questions about the testing, and all schools, SAT and ACT, looked at equally. You can go all SAT, all ACT, and if you submit them, the schools will look at them equally. Obviously, there are different scales and so forth, but you can definitely feel comfortable focusing on one or the other in your process. There are some questions about knowing what you're studying or what schools like declaring majors and so on. I know it can be a little different at a school where you have to choose, you have to declare for a college, or you have the option of a major. Drew, how does like defining an area, a major area of interest play out for Holy Cross in the process? Is it really important, or is it just a little bit of a guideline?
It's a great question, and I have an answer that's sort of a dead end. We don't allow students to come in with a major. Everyone's a blank slate. There's a part on the application for Holy Cross where you list your areas of academic interest, and we just ignore that. That's not true. We're going to send you targeted marketing emails about those things, so we don't totally ignore it, but it doesn't play a role in our decision-making process. Kids can take whatever classes they want when they start, if they know what they want to do or they don't. But it is like it's an important conversation, right? As you're developing your list about how well do you know or are you sure about what you want to study? And if you don't, and how that might help shape your list, it's one of the most important factors. And I bet Scarlett's got great insight about how that factors at UMass and schools like UMass.
Yeah, we are the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Holy Cross. You have to apply for a major at UMass Amherst. Even if you want to go in undecided, we have different undecided tracks. So you don't just come in not knowing what you want to do with a whole bunch of options and no kind of starting point. So we have undecided tracks in different fields. So natural sciences, humanities and fine arts, social and behavioral sciences. And then those have to develop into a fully fledged major that you pick by the end of sophomore year. That being said, you have to come in for a specific major and you're considered for admission for that specific major. So this is where any of our like prerequisites come into account. This is why we have competitive majors and things like that at UMass Amherst. On the whole, switching majors at UMass is actually pretty easy. I was only there for 3 years and I did it 4 or 5 times, ended up back where I started. But so for the most part, there is still that flexibility, even though you do come in studying what you want to study. Most students will end up switching their major at least once, or maybe finding another area of interest and picking that up as a secondary major or a minor.
Thank you both. And as you hear, very different at a lot of very different schools. So understanding each school and the ones you're interested in, how they look at and how they evaluate. Because knowing, like Scarlett, you said, with some of the competitive majors, like because sometimes the only entry point is that initial application versus transitioning between colleges. I'm going to move over to about affordability and financial aid and just kind of how would you talk to families about both paying for education and the value of a college education and just a kind of a financial aid process on your end as they're beginning to think about affording going to your schools. So Scarlett, do you want to talk about financial aid at UMass or just the
Sure.
process?
Yes. So for us, we just use FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid that students submit. Our financial aid office reviews that. And if you're accepted, you get a financial aid package a couple of weeks after you get your admissions decision. So that's one of the things to keep in mind if you're trying to decide between early action and regular decision. Like I believe it was Katrina mentioned earlier, there's not really like a difference in terms of the admissions for early action and regular decision. But if you want to get some of that financial aid information back sooner, you'll get it sooner in early action. And we do have the net price calculator on our website. It was newly revamped, so it's pretty close to the penny now, which is really nice. And there are a lot of independent scholarships available on our financial aid website as well, given by alum and things like that. One of the nice things about Massachusetts as well, a lot of towns have scholarships for students who are involved in the extracurriculars your students are involved in or want to go study what your students are involved in. They tend to be smaller scholarships, but a lot of people don't take advantage of those. I got close to $5,000 a year for college from local scholarships in Massachusetts, just because no one else was applying for them. And Did it pay for tuition? No. Did it cover my books and gas to drive home and back and things for my dorm and a lot of Dunkin' Donuts? Yeah. So every little bit does count. Our financial aid office is also really awesome. We have a fully staffed financial aid office, and they're happy to chat with you on the phone, answer questions, email. They do have virtual meetings that you can set up with them as well. And they're there to kind of help you figure out what is a good fit for your family, what are different options. Or if this is your first time ever hearing about the FAFSA and you are overwhelmed and need someone to help kind of walk you through it, they're happy to do that as well. So they're awesome. I definitely recommend reaching out to them for specific questions in regards to UMass.
The only thing I'll add is a humongous plug for MIFA. You see their website down there at the bottom, mifa.org. Their website has resources and information. They do webinars, they do podcasts, they do evening programs, they produce content. They are a nonprofit statewide organization, and they are here to help you understand affordability and paying for college. So huge plug for MIFA.
Thank you both. And yeah, definitely a plug for MIFA, and they can answer very specific questions about your personal situations, which is great. And our financial aid night on the 18th is sponsored by two financial aid representatives from, I believe it's still Bentley University will be joining us. But MIFA combined with never hesitate to reach out to financial aid offices to ask questions. They're super helpful, super supportive, and we'll certainly talk to students and families about the process. We get more into it, certainly into senior year. And I guess one thing I ask both of you, like we sometimes get the questions like, will it harm my admissions if I apply for financial aid? Knowing I need more money, is that going to hurt me in your admissions process? So just a quick note on how you view, or even if you see need in this in your evaluation. Drew, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, what you're speaking to there is this concept of admissions offices and colleges and universities being need aware. When that school is considering the admissions decision on the application, are they aware of the student's level of need or lack of need when they make their admissions decision? You can ask the school; they'll tell you, yes, we're need aware. No, we're not need aware. The follow-up question then usually is, do you meet need? If I qualify for financial aid, at what level will you meet that at? It's usually a percentage. Two important questions. There's a variety of different combinations out there. We are need aware here at Holy Cross, but we do meet need. And it is, I will just say that being need aware as a college university, it's binary. So at Holy Cross, I would love to rush and say like, yeah, but we're not really need aware on about 90+% of the decisions we make. 94% of the acceptances we make, we're not need aware, but you're either are or you aren't. And so we are need aware. And it's important for colleges to be able to stay open and afford their operations. But at the same time, I think that's true for families as well, right? You don't want to put your family in a position where you may have applied and gained acceptance to a school without being in the position to be able to afford that university. So affordability is complicated and sometimes even as difficult or more difficult to understand than admissibility. But it's just as important. And I think the more information you can gather from reliable sources, MIFA, school counselors, colleges, and universities, the better position you'll be in.
Thanks, Drew.
I cannot stress enough how separate financial aid and admissions offices are at UMass Amherst. I know that on like the Students Common App, we can see if they plan to apply for financial aid, but that's about it. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone say, no, I'm not going to apply for financial aid. So that's all the information that we get. So we don't take that into account at all in the admissions decision. Financial aid does that all on their end. As a state school, though, we are unfortunately not able to completely meet all need. But that's a really great question for our financial aid team if you want to know more about how that works.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question came in, Drew, about financial aid and early decision, and how is that viewed any differently from your end when a student applies ED and you give them that initial package? Are you still meeting their full need in early decision?
It's a great question to ask of any school that you're considering an early application, whether it's early decision or early action, both for financial aid, but also for merit scholarships, because some schools may front load merit scholarships into early decision or early action. At Holy Cross, you're going to get the same package no matter what round you apply in. But the suspicion behind the question, I think, is valid. And it's a great question to ask of each school you apply to about what their aid, both financial and merit policies are in each of their individual application rounds.
Appreciate that. And we welcome discussions with families about that. We don't necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of your, financial need, but when you do like apply early decision, you are making a commitment to attend if you can afford to attend based on the package they're given. And one thing, if it is a viable package, and it's doable, also remember you don't really have the option to compare it to other packages you might see in regular decision. So just one thing, sometimes we talk about that process, like if you want to be able to see all the options in front of you, sometimes early decision, even if it is a reasonable financial package, it doesn't allow you to see what else you may have gotten down the road. So just something to consider, and happy to have conversations about that. A number of the other questions were about, so SCORE. We use SCORE, and colleges are familiar because that's how we send documents to them, and some communication. But if you didn't receive an invite to SCORE, or you can't access SCORE, you can reach out to your student school counselor, and we can invite you, re-invite you, help you get access. Your students can actually invite you. So you could talk to your kids and ask them to invite you. They could do that too. You have a little bit more limited access as family members than the students do. So you can't delete colleges from their list. You can make suggestions, but you can't take things away from them that they're thinking about. But you can see what they have there. And just looking at another question that came in, more for us, is there an ideal number of colleges to apply to? No, we work with students and families on looking and having what we would think of as a balanced list. I actually don't think students to focus too much on that on the front end, to kind of like just explore, kind of students seeing what they like, right? And what often happens is just based on what they like, they start to develop a balanced list all on their own, without having to be super focused on it. But if we were ever concerned that they didn't have a list that included, kind of some more likely options to get in, and it was really heavy on super selective schools, we would definitely have a conversation and work with you and your families to add some more schools. And because there's so many great options out there. That's one thing, in terms of reducing the flame and the pressure in this process. There are so many wonderful places to get an education, and when I think of just being on this end and talking to so many wonderful reps, seeing so many wonderful schools, I am so comfortable with so many opportunities and experiences out there, and just helping students and families, find the places that are right for them. But I have no question that there are going to be some great options for all of you if you're looking to attend college down the road. we're kind of wrapping up on the questions. And just we have this slide up here just really as encouragement, and just, things for as school counselors that we want to leave families with in terms of, there's something for everyone out there. There's a pathway. They're not all going to look the same, but we're going to help you and your students find that. Really wanted to stress, as we were talking about how many wonderful places there are. Selectivity does not define the quality. There's too much, as Drew was saying, there's so much written about the few schools that brought back standardized testing. There's too much written as well on the super, super selective schools, and that as the prize for too many students and families. There's so many great places, and often the place where your student will be most successful is going to be kind of where they're most comfortable, and fit in and not feel like this pressure to keep up with other students. But we hope we're going to help you guys find that and know there's so many great places and rankings. I don't talk about them. I don't look at them. So we hope you guys can lessen the flame on that as well. Yeah, we support every kind of plan. So talk to us about, we'll talk individually with your students about their plans. So whether it's college or something else, or college after doing something else, we want to support every student, and we hope it's fun. That's why I want to stress too. This is a really exciting time for your students to be thinking about kind of what they want to do when they leave high school. And we hope it is way more fun than it is, stressful and pressure filled. So it does require a lot of filtering out of the noise that might come in this process, and we'll help you do that. But it is an exciting time. Scarlett and Drew, we so appreciate you joining us. Is there anything you wanted to say as we part? Any last words of wisdom as these families leave us this evening? Drew, do you want to start?
I will. I'll just double down on what I said before. If you can get on a college campus, go grab that scone or smoothie, grab a copy of the student newspaper. You'll learn more about culture in that 10 minutes than maybe even from any other part of any of the work that Scarlett and I do. And it's a great way to sort of de-escalate and even slow down the admissions or the campus visit as well.
Thank you. Scarlett, parting words?
Yeah, this is going to be kind of a whirlwind of the next year and a half. I think it's important to remember that for the most part, any decisions made are not going to be the end of the road, right? If your student falls in love with a school and they apply and they get accepted and they're so excited to go and they get there and a year in, they're like, you know what? I'm not feeling the major I'm in and I can't switch my major to something else that interests me, or I'm actually too far from home or too close to home. Be prepared. This just isn't a good fit for me. I feel like I'm not finding a good group of friends. I think I actually want to look into going somewhere else, or, maybe take a year off and do an internship or a co-op or work and maybe reevaluate going to college later on. Those are all okay. Paths can change, goals and dreams and all of that can change. And so you're going to do all this work and it will be worth it. Just be flexible, be adaptable. Everyone will end up where they're supposed to.
Great. Thank you both very much. Thanks for giving your words of wisdom and your time. We look forward to working with you in this process. Good luck with your rest of your decisions for these current seniors. And thank you to the students and families for joining us. We're excited to work with you throughout this process. So have a great night. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.